February 23rd, 2026. Good day, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm, of course, Connor. We're going to move into what's happening here in Santa Clarita Valley. I'll give you a 7-day snapshot. I do these every day. I've changed up the format just a little bit to kind of give you some idea what's happening maybe on a more clearer scale instead of just verbally. I did prepare this, vibe code this into existence. Also, if you want to get any neighborhood information with regard to your property, of course, you can go to scv123.com. We're the original Santa Clarita openhouse.com agents. So please check that out when you have a chance. All right, so let's talk about what's happening here. So we have interest rates that seem to be stabilizing a little bit. They had been coming down as of late, and they're trickling down ever so slightly, just keeping buyers a little bit interested. We still see that in Santa Clarita Valley. We're running in the neighborhood of 519, 520 total active listings on the market all across all of the cities. That's going to include Canyon Country, Castaic, Newhall, Saugus, Stevenson Ranch, and of course Valencia. And in each of these areas, different sellers have different needs. And it's going to depend on the actual seller and what they want as a result of their home sale. In some cases, sellers are making their home sale dependent on finding that next property, because I've been running into a lot of lately a lot of empty nesters, which people are coming into our open houses and they want to try to find something that's maybe less large as where they currently live, 4,000 and 5,000 square foot residences. I've heard as of late, and they're trying to find something, 1,700, 2,200. That adjustment's kind of weird, even though the nests are empty. Think about this a little bit before you jump all the way in, but that's what we're seeing a lot of lately. Right now, Wall Street, something else that popped onto the wire, Wall Street's predicting a 43% chance of deep rate cuts. That's pretty good when it gets over even 10, 12%. So that's probably going to happen. We'll have to watch and see when that does pan out. Now, the Fed chair, they're talking about replacing him sometime in May. But when the Fed funds rate gets adjusted, it might have some slight impact on the mortgage rate, but the mortgage rates are more tied to that 10-year bond, that particular market, and the government's talking about buying a whole bunch of those particular mechanisms. Maybe it's going to help actually change the market a little bit, and we'll see even a bigger reduction in home purchasing interest rates. And some of the buyers out there, they're holding and waiting to see what happens. One of the things that I'll tell you, if interest rates come down, let's say you don't wait and you want to buy now, if interest rates do come down, then maybe today, if you want to purchase today, you might want to look at getting a loan with a lender that's going to allow you to do a refinance for free. That does exist. You need to talk to your agent. I only represent sellers. If you want me to introduce you to a buyer's agent that understands that whole philosophy in the real estate games, then let me know. More than happy to introduce you. All right, Redfin is labeling 2026 as the great housing reset. They haven't been right all the time. We'll have to see what happens, but we're watching as wages are growing faster than home prices, and sellers are going to assume that this is going to be a 2021 bidding war as we get into March, April. I hope that would be the case, at least for sellers out there, but I'm not sure if that's actually going to pan out. We'll have to see. Our inventory's low. We don't have a whole lot of inventory, so that's not the reason. It's just buyers are kind of waiting for these interest rates to come down. Of course, listening to their friends and family members that have a 2 and 3% mortgage. That's how that is. All right, so as far as California insurance, we're seeing a lot of that continue to be very expensive. A lot of questions we get asked at open houses. What's the insurance rate for the area? It's dependent on the homeowner too. It's not just the house itself. The historical record of the homeowner comes into play, at least from what I understand about it and what I've seen since 1998. If you have a lot of claims, which should also become the buyer's knowledge, they should be made aware of this, especially within 5 years or so. They should have an understanding as to what kind of claims have been made on the property so they can do their proper investigations, right? So that's something to also look at. Failed escrows are happening and falling out because of the insurance issue. It used to be we would wait until, third and fourth week of escrow. I mean, almost right before closing, before we actually said, you know what, you need to get some insurance because you're getting a loan on the property, so on. And we would wait all the way to that time. Now you can't. You have to do that kind of out of the chute. In fact, not a bad idea if you settle on a particular area as a home buyer. And I run into home buyers that are asking these questions all the time. You want to find out if, in fact, that neighborhood happens to be well insured. Is insurance available? Do the homeowners have some kind of a plan in there? Is there an insurance company that will write policies in there as well? So important to do that very much at the beginning, especially if you have a neighborhood identified. Let's say Bridgeport's your thing. You love Bridgeport. Again, call your insurance agent if you have one and ask them. Now, if you're a home buyer, you might not have a committed insurance agent yet. Maybe you're on the younger end of the age spectrum. If that's the case, a couple different routes you can go. You can go to a mainline insurance carrier like a State Farm or Farmers. You can go right to them, or you can go to a broker that brokers out insurance. Depends, but I would at least kind of balance both. There are some brokers that don't write insurance for some of the main carriers, but some of the carriers they have are phenomenal. I like Scott Wilk for that, W-I-L-K, if you want to look him up. He's out here in Santa Clarita Valley. He's a great broker, and if you want to go with a mainline, Henry Rodriguez would be who I would hit up on that one out here. I think he's with State Farm, if memory serves, or Farmers. I think State Farm. Anyway, Henry Rodriguez, either with Farmers or State Farm. Santa Clarita, it'll pop up. All right, so we're watching as the market's going to continue. The 7-day SCV Pulse, I did put that together as well. So we have 10 properties that have closed escrow in the past week, 10 in Valencia also. That was Saugus, 6 in Canyon Country, and Castaic. Only a couple properties have sold in the last week. These overall averages and weekly snapshots really don't give big indications of where the market's moving. It just shows it is still moving. When you're reporting multiple weeks at zero, stagnant, done. But anyway, so Saugus, we have 2-to-1 sold versus non-sold success ratios. The hot zone out here in Saugus is going to be Plum Canyon, River Village, high in that one, 1.22 million in a closing. River Village is behind the Starbucks there, New Hall Ranch Road, that section. Saugus buyers definitely being decisive and choosy. And if you price these properties right, they do move. In Valencia, we have a 1.25 million peak sale in Northbridge. That one went out. You can find that at SantaClaritaOpenHouses.com. 50% success rate, 10 sold versus 10 expired, and holds. Holding properties that are being held could be for various reasons. It's not necessarily the issue with maybe a seller changing their mind. It could be they're inundated with offers. Still not the right reason to select the hold. If a homeowner gets COVID or gets sick or has some other issue, then yeah, that's maybe a good time to select the hold. The hold as far as a status goes. So if you see a property online one day and the next day it's gone, that just came on the market, it might not be that it actually sold or is in escrow. Contact your agent, have them look it up, make a phone call to that seller's agent and find out exactly what's happening. It might not be that it's gone. It might just be that they're holding off because some family event or personal event stopped them from being able to have people come look at it. Buyers are scrutinizing Mello-Roos and HOA fees. When you're going into the new housing areas, make sure that you know exactly what those numbers are. Now, and there are buyers agents out there that represent people at new housing. You know, if you want me to make an introduction to you for that, great, just hit me up. But, you know, as representing sellers, I see the seller's end of that. A lot of times those agents that are in the new housing, of course, they're on the seller's side, right? 100%. You can also use them as well. Just make sure that you read what you're looking at, the documentation. Some people have been taking it and going and putting into their large language model, their favorite AI systems. Once you put those documents in there, there's no privacy. How somebody else would get access to it, all they would do is write the program to go scrape that data set, I would suppose. So be careful with putting any of that information in there, especially the documents that have your stuff on it, your social, your bank account information. Once you post it, you know, there's people out there crawling all over the place. Canyon Country, we have friction points of 10 plus non-sold versus 6 sold. Listing glut at the $750,000 to $900,000 range. It could be the pricing strategies right now, depending on the residences. Homes are sitting over 60 days. That's something that whenever I was training with Citigroup in the sale of their foreclosure assets, they always had a 30-day market change. So you would look at a property if it hadn't moved or hadn't gotten an offer on it within 30 days, you would then be mandated by the bank to look at the values of the property, what's happening in the neighborhood, and then doing a price reduction. Working with the banks in that time, you only got a couple cracks at that before they fired you and hired somebody else. There was no love lost at all, depending between the banks and the agents that they were using to sell their foreclosure assets. Castaic snapshot: inventory remains tightest in the valley. A 980K high in North Castaic as far as listings go. Withdrawn activity. Hasley Hills price fatigue, so that area is just. It's going to pick up here as we get into March, as it always does. Failure analysis: 25 withdrawn expired records this week. Homes aren't failing because of the houses. They fail because of deceptive AI comps. These systems out there, these syndication websites, they're putting together entire algorithms. They're basically building the inner workings of this machine that gives this information to sellers out there in hopes that the seller will reach out to their agents, or in hopes that buyers will as well, because that's how they make their money. The syndication sites make the money in selling your information as leads to the real estate agents willing to pay for it. I'm not one, but there are a lot, and some of them pay, $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 a month to get this information. I don't play the game. I publish my content this way, but in that regard, sometimes if you're really trying to extract the best, you might hinge a little bit and maybe not be code centric. Maybe your mission statement is weak, or you don't even have one. So be careful when you're looking to hire your representative. On the selling side of it, hit me up. Let's talk. If you're on the buying side of it, I have a great referral group of buyers agents that only handle real estate buyers. So they're kind of their heads in the game in the right way. As far as I'm concerned, there is no dual agency in anybody that I work with. That's just kind of my motto. 3% margin, 1.4 million. Valencia did expire. It was overpriced by about 3%. If they would have just done that adjustment, it would have gone out. In 2026, 3% too high does equal it's not going to sell. Now, don't let an algorithm guess what your equity's worth. You definitely need to work on finding out exactly what those last properties sold for. In Santa Clarita, it's not a mystery. In Santa Clarita, it's not that difficult because most of the residences out here are based on the track system, and most have had closings somewhat recently. And even if they did, the market adjustments can be done, and you can figure out where that value happens to be. Something sold in the neighborhood at one time. You just have to fast forward it to today's particular values. AI slop, Zillow descriptions are now being filtered by buyers as fake, which is interesting. There's something to have AI write something. There's something to have a human write something. Now, if the human goes in with one iteration, the very first prompt with AI, and they want them to write a pricing description or a description on a listing that we took, and it's looking at the title profile report, for example. So it has the square footage, bedroom, bathroom, year built, and all this fancy stuff. So it's looking at this. One of the things that ends up happening is when you ask it to, and then you give it the pictures as well. So it's looking at the pictures. So then it tries to come up with this, that real estate thing, open and airy, entertainer's dream, entertainer-sized yard, blah, blah, all that stuff. It just doesn't look like a human being did it. And that's because the human being only goes in one shot and then publishes it. If the human being would just take a moment and maybe do 5 or 6 iterations, repeats, and just even asking them for something different, something more human, something less salesy, something less, whatever that word happens to be, however it formatted it the first few times, you'll see that it's going to spit out some information. Unfortunately, in all of the world, not just in real estate, but a lot of people just don't ask anymore. They just take that first thing it spits out and they publish it. Yeah, we're starting to see that kind of fail. The honor standard, it's important to look at this a few different ways. Like I said, part of my process, if you're going to use AI, you need to keep iterating with it to make sure you get something that sounds good, and then maybe bounce that off a couple of human beings instead of just saying, hey, AI, would you let me know if this is good or not? All right, 14-day windows. We're seeing successful sales, 6 to 14 days. In the Santa Clarita Valley, it's going to depend on that seller's pricing strategy and the agents, most specifically advertising and marketing strategy. If they're using AI to properly place the listing online, heads and tails above the human component, but you have to look at it as a human if you are going to be having AI start to write that copy. Same issue with property descriptions. People look at it as just like a con job or a con game, and us as humans are getting less accepting of the things we see online because of the AI slop that happens to be out there. All right, so neighborhood nuance. We have Mello-Roos in some areas, $4,000 a year, even more, and there's a particular percentage that gets attached to the neighborhoods that have the Mello-Roos, and some of them are like paying double taxes, probably the most expensive. Plus, in that neighborhood I'm thinking of, you have double taxes, and then on top of that, you have two different homeowners associations. So it's pretty pricey. If you look at the price per square foot, though, for those residences, it's adjusted, and that's what gets a lot of buyers kind of in trouble. They look at it online, they see this price point that's ridiculously low. They just don't realize that you're, popping off over $300 a month for HOA, and then an additional double taxes, so another 1.25, 1.5% on top of your normal tax base. It's like living in Texas. So that's kind of where that comes in. So make sure you know going in, and also look at the price adjustment. Like I said, if you have Mello-Roos taxes and the property is less expensive than the other ones, you might not be able to write off the HOA, and you might not be able to write off the Mello-Roos. I've seen some very clever things done in the tax accounting world. So you have to talk to your accountant. You're not supposed, it doesn't work. You can write off mortgage interest, depending again on your tax profile. Those other two items usually not, but people do all sorts of stuff. But what I'm saying is usually that mortgage interest going in, that's the one that's totally justified and okay as long as you fit within the brackets that the government provides. Pretty soon if they start taxing flops in the computer world and with regard to AI, taxes will probably just go away. There's something else. We'll have to keep an eye on that. We frame the fee. We don't hide the fee. Truth builds faster escrow, smoother closings, of course. And big tech AI is definitely screening your buyers before even I see them. You want to make sure that whenever you are a seller out there and a buyer comes to your property, writes the offer, your agent submits it to you, you do a little bit more research, because it used to be that pre-approval letters were very valid. People didn't fake those. For some reason, buyers seem to, they're doing their research online, so they're producing a letter of intent, and they're also producing a letter of qualification. And that letter of qualification is totally just generated by the machine. And I don't know if AI is offering to write a letter of pre-qualification, but the information on it's fake. It's important that your agent, your seller's agent, and I'm a seller's only agent, calls the person on the piece of paper. And then we need to verify that that person is a real human being, not just AI trying to fool us. So there's a whole set of questions. It's just like Blade Runner, not just like it, but kind of like it, where you're firing off questions asking what would appear to be a person on the other end. Questions. But is it AI? Is it a person? Right now you might be able to tell because of the hesitation and inability to interrupt at the same rate as a human being. However, you give it a couple months, we're going to see a whole new difference in that. There will be people that are answering the phone on the other end of it that are totally AI generated for a lot of businesses as well. Legit businesses. And they're not trying to fool anybody like maybe a buyer would. So make sure your agent, if they're representing you as a seller, is making these phone calls personally and then verifying that in fact what they're saying is true. Sellers are losing lead to bad AI filters. Yeah, we see this when people are going to the syndication sites. Syndication sites have put AI-enabled chats on there. So when people are going in to want to buy real estate, they're filtering it through those chats. And it seems very self-serving to me, so be wary with that. Know that that does exist. Whenever I take a listing and we have it on the market for a week and a half, we start to look at how that listing is being syndicated on the major syndication sites. I don't buy into any of that crap. I don't like them. They don't serve me. They don't serve sellers' purposes as far as I'm concerned. But you need to kind of see how those interactive chat bots are talking about that particular listing, and if they're saying something that's of a guarded nature or something that could be a violation in some way, then they need to be called on the carpet with regard to that, because they don't get to escape the rules. You can't cut people off from purchasing property because of their race or gender, any protected class. Period. Either they can qualify or they can't qualify. And if they're qualified, they can buy the house as long as you come to an agreement. But some of the syndication sites, they're putting these AI overlays in their systems when people are asking questions, and that's going to create a problem for some sellers out there, especially if the alignment's off. Everybody loves Zillow. Everybody wants to go search on Zillow, and that's fine to a point, but really, you buyers out there, if you're using an agent I refer you to, or you go find your own buyer's agent, they should be doing some of that heavy lifting. They should be doing some of that searching, and they should be sending you these properties. And everything you send them that you find on Zillow or Redfin, Realtor.com, I don't care who, they should be vetting those properties. I had, last time I represented buyers, it's been quite a while since I switched over to a seller's only agent, but one of the last times they were sending me these listings, and I would say 50% of them weren't true and accurate in scope. And they were not even on the market. They were listings that had been into escrow, and the syndication site wasn't showing them as such. So then, of course, those buyers had the question, well, is Connor really being upfront? So finally, Connor had to show them the exact MLS sheets and show them that the agents that they happened to be calling, this was prior to Connor's instruction. I loved, what was that, the first person? Anyway, prior to my instruction to them, don't call, let me call. So they would talk to these agents, and the agents would, not even being associated with the property because they're not the listing agent on these things, they would then say, well, oh yes, it's available. Well, it says it's in escrow. Well, no, that was a mistake on the syndication site, so that's really not. And then they hook them, they bring them in, they get them to sign the buyer-broker agreement, and then from there they say, oh yeah, just went into escrow. I mean, come on, really? Aren't we a little bit better than that? All right, that's it. Let's move into this. We have, where are we on this one? Verify, that's good. That's a little bit more about me. Tech handle the data. Human prediction, that's more about me. Final directive. Yeah, Santa Clarita open houses. You can see all the information out there. I appreciate you watching today. We will see you tomorrow with tomorrow's update. Real estate's moving. We're going to see more listings entering the market here over the next couple months. We'll have to watch and see how that buyer drive is formatted. If the buyer drive stays where it is now, our market's going to be nice and steady. If we have a lot of buyers, then the market's going to continue to be in the seller's zone, and things are going to start closing a lot faster. And if we see it go the other way, where we have more listings yet less buyer drive, we're going to see the market start to morph into more of a buyer's market. We're going to see larger discounts out there with properties. I think it's going to be the opposite of that because the Fed chair being replaced in May, and I think a lot of buyers are going to get a jump on it so they don't have to face all that unreal competition when rates do get a little bit lower. All right, everybody, thank you for watching. I'm Connor with Honor. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care.